Today, we're going to be giving our power rankings for Week 14 of the 2024 NFL season. Without further ado, let's get into these power rankings. So the first group we have is a team by themselves, and that is the Giants at 32. I think it is clear that the Giants are the worst team. At least teams like the Jags and the Patriots and the Raiders and the Browns, who maybe you could argue as well, were competitive in their most recent games. The Giants just haven't really been competitive. They weren't. It was kind of a close game on Thanksgiving, but not really. So I think the Giants are in a tier of their own. Next group we have is the Jags at 31, the Patriots at 30, the Raiders at 29, the Browns at 28, the Jets at 27, and the Titans at 26. I didn't move any of the four teams of the Jags, Patriots, Raiders, and Browns. Jags in a close game versus the Texans without Trevor Lawrence. Mac Jones actually didn't play that bad. Patriots were in a close game versus the Colts. They honestly should have won that game because they were dominating the Colts on the run game, I'm pretty sure. And they had, I think, some picks on Richardson as well. And then the Colts stayed in the game and came back there. But they honestly should have won that game. Raiders at 29. You could argue you should have also beaten the Chiefs too on Friday, the Black Friday game. And then the Browns were in a good game versus the Broncos, high-scoring game. And I think since they were all in very competitive games against pretty good teams, the Browns against the Broncos, Raiders, Chiefs, Patriots, Colts, and then Jags, Texans, I think they all deserve to just stay at the same spot. And not much could be changed there. And then the next two teams there, the Titans and the Jets. Jets, I know it was a close game versus the Seahawks, but they had a big lead, if I remember right, and they kind of blew it. And then the Titans kind of got blown out by the Commanders. The only reason I would put the Titans over the Jets is because they were ranked higher originally, and they lost to the better team than the Jets did. But those two could be switched, definitely. Next grouping we have is the Cowboys at 25, the Saints at 24, the Panthers at 23, and the Bears at 22. Now, Cowboys, they did get their win over the Giants on Thanksgiving, so I'll give them that credit. So I moved them up over the teams that lost. However, it just obviously is against the worst team, not the most impressive win, so I didn't want to, raise them a ton of spots, but I did think they deserved to be above those other teams. Saints at 24, it was a tough loss to the Rams. They crawled their way back a little bit, I think. I don't know who was up there. And they have looked a lot better since their interim head coach, Darren Rizzi, has come in. But I think they should stay at 24. I do think they are better than the Cowboys, and I think they would beat the Cowboys. They already beat them earlier in the year, but that was a completely different Saints team, but I still think they would beat them now. And then the Panthers and Bears at 22, 23. I know they both lost. The Panthers, I decided to move them up 4 spots even though they lost because they were in a close game versus the Chiefs. They were in a close game versus the Bucs. You could argue if they called that Adam Thielen touchdown, they might have beaten the Bucs. Bryce Young has played insanely better compared to the first 2 weeks, and even compared to last year, even though last year he was much better than he was the first 2 weeks. But he's shown improvement. They've played very good recently, and they also beat the Saints as well. So I think they deserve that little jump. Now, if they lose to the Eagles, they'll probably just stay around this range, and they won't jump up 4 for losing to the Eagles unless it's a close game. And then the Bears at 22 is kind of the same thing as the Panthers. They are getting in close games. They almost beat the Packers. They almost beat the Vikings. They almost beat the Lions, the best team in football. And just like how Bryce has played a lot better, Caleb Williams has also played a lot better. And I think despite losses, these two teams and their 2 young quarterbacks have shown a lot of improvement throughout the year, and I think they deserve to climb the rankings because of that. Because I think they beat the Saints, Cowboys, and Titans and Jets. Next group we have is a little bit of a bigger group. We have the Bengals at 21, the Falcons at 20, the Rams at 19, the Niners at 18, the Colts at 17, and the Dolphins at 16. Bengals at 21. I know it was a close loss at the end of the game to the Steelers, but in reality it wasn't that close of a game. The Steelers, after they recovered from that pick 6, they kind of just took the game away and ran with it. But the Bengals offense is still incredible. And I think they'd easily beat teams like the Bears, Panthers, and Saints. So I didn't want to lower them too much. Falcons, another team coming off a tough loss Kirk Cousins throwing 4 picks in that game. Not a great look for Kirk Cousins. I'm seeing that they should start Michael Penix. I don't think we should go that far. I think Penix should be a year 2 start, or next year. And then I have the Rams and then the Colts are the teams that won in this group of bottom 16 teams. The Rams with their win over the Saints and the Colts with their win over the Patriots. I think they deserve to jump teams like the Falcons and Bengals and for winning. And then I gave the Colts a little bit more of a boost than the Rams, even putting them over the Niners because the Niners haven't looked great. I know they've been injured. I know their team's been banged up, but they're 5-7. They haven't looked particularly good. Brock Purdy even played last week. I know it was the snow. And I think the Colts have just been playing much better, and they could actually get themselves a playoff spot. Another team who has played better recently, I know they didn't look great against the Packers, but it's cold out, and that's their weakness. I think the Dolphins deserve some credit for how they've played since Tua's come back. So I gave them the spot over the teams like the Niners. And even though they lost, I think they deserve the spot over teams like the Colts and the Rams. Next group is the Buccaneers at 15, the Cardinals at 14, the Seahawks at 13, and the Texans at 12. Bucs, I know it was a close game versus the Panthers, but they still beat the Panthers. I didn't want to put them too high because it is the Panthers, and they should have lost that game. Baker did not play great, but Bucky Irving did, and so did Mike Evans. And then I have teams like the Cardinals and Seahawks. I kept them at 13-14. Cardinals, they did lose to the Vikings, and the Seahawks almost lost to the Jets, but I think they've just been very good overall. Seahawks are on a roll recently. That division race is getting... The fact that those 4 teams are that close, like the Niners haven't looked good, and they still can technically win the division. I think they're like 2 games behind the Seahawks. And then the Texans at 12. I know they beat the Jags, but it wasn't a pretty game. Stroud continues to be a little bit in a sophomore slump. Still a good quarterback, obviously. Still a good team. But I think they're definitely outside of that. Like, I know they're going to make the playoffs because their division isn't great, even though I think the Colts could still technically win the division. I think they might be 3 games behind, though, so it might be tough for the Colts to win the division. But it seems like the Texans will make the playoffs, but I don't see them having much success in the playoffs. I think they're outside of that top 10 group, but I still think they're up there with teams like the Seahawks and Cardinals and Bucs, and they still did win, so I wanted to keep them at 12. Next group is the Commanders at 11, the Broncos at 10, the Chargers at 9, and the Vikings at 8. Commanders, big win over the Titans. I know it's the Titans, but they looked great. The game actually got close there towards, I think it was the 3rd or 4th quarter, but they still got the win. I think their win was more impressive than the Texans, so I switched those 2. But I didn't want to put them over the Broncos and Chargers because those teams have played great almost all year long. Great game on Monday night between the Broncos and Browns. And then the Chargers had their win. So I kept the Chargers over the Broncos because I think they've just looked better throughout the season. And the Chargers did have that good win over the Falcons. Defense played great as they have all year. Again, these 2 teams could be flipped, but I gave the nod to the Chargers because they were already ranked higher, and I think they had a slightly more impressive win because the Broncos' defense kind of let them down against Jameis, at least at the beginning. And then the Vikings at 8. I know they beat the Cardinals, but they haven't looked they played a lot of close games. They haven't looked very impressive over recently, and I think the next group deserves that slight spot ahead of them, even though they did win. They're still 8, and I still think they're a good team. But I think that when it comes to the next group with the Steelers at 7, Packers at 6, and Ravens at 5, the Steelers, particularly at 7, deserve that spot above them as they looked great versus the Bengals. Their defense did let them down a little bit. It was a little bit of late game, but still a great team. Pittsburgh, Russell Wilson's playing great. And then when it comes to the Ravens and Packers at 5 and 6, I didn't want to make too many changes there. I know the Ravens did lose, but it is to one of the better teams in the Eagles. And the Packers played great against a good Dolphins team. So you could make an argument that the Packers deserve the spot over the Ravens. But I think overall the Ravens have just been one of the better teams. The Packers have as well, but I think I'd give them slight edge to the Ravens. And then the last four also haven't changed. Chiefs at 4, Eagles at 3, Bills at 2, and Lions at 1. Chiefs, I know they continue to win very close games, potentially should lose them, but they're still, I don't know their exact, they're still, 11-1? Yeah, they're 11-1 still. You can't argue with that. Eagles at 3, they beat the Ravens, one of the other better teams in the league. They're, I think, won 8 in a row. Saquon continues to make a case for MVP. I think they deserve to be up there. Bills at 2 and the Lions at 1. I mean, there's not much to say about those three teams, the Lions, Bills, and Eagles. I think they're clearly the top 3 teams. You can honestly, with how the Lions have looked recently, how they almost lost to the Bears, how they didn't blow out the Colts, you can honestly argue that any of those 3 teams could be the best. But since all of them won, I just kept the order the same. We'll see what happens this week with the Lions playing a good team in the Packers. The Bills playing a relatively good team in the Rams, and then the Eagles playing the Panthers. We'll see what happens this week, but I didn't want to change too much as you can honestly put any of them at 1, and they all won, so. That will conclude our power rankings for Week 14. Let me know in the comment section what you agreed with and what you disagreed with. And also, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like. And also, hit the subscribe button. It helps out a lot. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.